What's up, everybody? Today I'm battling my enemies. My enemies being these gigantic trees that I have in my yard. They block the sunlight, they drop pine needles, they're messy. They're anything but what I want right now. But I'm not cutting them out yet, so here's what I'm gonna do. The problem with this tree is that it leaves me with these bare spots underneath here. Not real bad, it will eventually fill in, but it's ugly right now. So what I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna seed underneath the trees. We have one right here in our backyard. We got our palm tree back in, so that one doesn't bother me at all. I love that one. And this pine tree right here, this one also drops tons of stuff and kills the grass below it. So today I'm gonna drop down some seed, put some peat moss on it, cover it with some starter fertilizer, keep it wet and hope for the best. Just to give you a little update on the backyard right now, this is my best grass I have because it gets full sun, no tree interference other than these pine trees, but back here it's looking awesome right now. It seriously is like a golf course with no divots. So not everywhere looks like that though. Underneath the trees there's some thin spots. There's a few spots that need a little bit of seeding, so I'm gonna do that today. So what I'm gonna use today is some perennial ryegrass seed. I found this on Amazon, Pennington Smart Seed perennial ryegrass. I've never used it before, but I'm hoping it does the job. The reason I chose perennial ryegrass is one, because it germinates quickly. It only takes a couple days to come up. Two, it's relatively shade tolerant. It's not great. Nothing's great in the shade. No grass plant does really well in the shade, but it does okay. And three, I just like the way perennial ryegrass looks. It's what they have at Augusta National. I'm sure it's a different blend than this. However, it stripes nicely. It's got a nice shiny look to it, so that's why I'm choosing perennial ryegrass. So what I did before I start laying the seed is I cleared out all the pine needles underneath there, raked it up a little bit, and any of the bare spots right now I'm just dropping seed in by hand. I'm trying to simulate what a spreader would do because I don't want to bring the whole spreader out for just these little areas. So I'm going to hand seed this. So right now that's what I'm doing. I try not to put too much in one spot, and you got to remember that each seed is going to turn into a plant. It's not like you have to put a seed down for every blade of grass that comes up. A lot of times people put down too much seed and they think if I throw a ton down it's going to get really thick, but really you're just wasting seed when you do that. Alright, so next step in this project, I already laid the seed down, just got done doing that, so now I'm going to cover it with a thin layer of some peat moss. The peat moss is going to keep that seed wet, and it's also going to help keep the seed away from the birds, because birds are going to swoop in, they're going to try to eat that seed, and that peat moss should keep them from being able to easily see where the seeds are. A couple things with this peat moss. One, it's really dusty and dirty, so be prepared to get really dirty. Pay attention to where the wind is. You don't want to be dropping this stuff and having it blow up into your face all the time. Second thing is there's little sticks that come in this too, so as I'm doing this I'm trying to grab any of those little sticks and get them out of the way because I don't want to get those caught up in my mower. And I just laid down a light layer, so I put down seed, then I put down a layer of peat moss, and now I'm going to take a broom and I'm going to wipe that in, basically like you would if you're top dressing a lawn. So I'm pretty much just top dressing my grass with peat moss. After I'm done with that, I'm going to lay down starter fertilizer. It's been raining like crazy and it's supposed to again tonight, so I'm gonna wait for that to happen and hope for the best. As I'm brooming in this peat moss, I'm trying not to knock the seed out of its place, so I'm being kind of gentle with that. I just want to get that peat moss into the canopy and smooth things out a little bit to make sure it's nice and flat. That's going to stay on top of the seed, and when that peat moss gets wet, it's going to keep that seed wet. And that's the main thing with growing grass, is you got to, as soon as you plant the grass, you got to keep it wet, and if it dries out, it's not going to work. So that's why I use the peat moss, because that holds its moisture and it keeps that seed wet. That way it's more likely to germinate, and that's also why I use starter fertilizer, because that's also going to help increase the chances of that seed taking off and becoming a grass plant. Now that the seed's laid down, it's all covered with peat moss. The last step I'm going to do is I'm going to cover that peat moss with some starter fertilizer, and again, I'm just trying to simulate what the spreader would do. I'm not using the spreader on this because it's not a huge area, so by hand I'm just throwing out that fertilizer on there. And once I'm done with that, you just need to water the grass and hope for the best. Now that all the seeds laid down, it's covered with peat moss, and I put out the starter fertilizer, the last thing I'm going to do is just water that new seed. And when you do that, make sure you don't go too heavy in any spot. You can see I'm shaking the water side to side to make sure that that water doesn't kind of blow out any of those areas where there's new seed. And just keep the grass wet. Come out a couple times a day, and before you know it, you're going to have brand new grass. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, click that subscribe button.